Well, it indeed sounds a bit like a desperate call right now, let's speak frankly. At the level of military insurgency or armed opposition, the situation in Panjshir is very marginal if you look at the whole scale of the nation. And from that point of view, it's difficult to see right now where other pockets of armed resistance to the Taliban rule could appear. What seems to be much more important, perhaps, at the society level, it's that you start to have very strong signals within a lot of segments of Afghan society that there is a more a passive and silent form of resistance to Taliban rule that is taking ground, and hopefully that will be able to curb the more disturbing element of that building up rule. But at the level of armed resistance, apart some pocket of resistance in the Azawad country, in the center of the country, the situation is rather strongly in favor of the Taliban right now.
But I mean, the Taliban obviously has enemies in Afghanistan and across the world. Certainly in several Western countries, the Taliban are not the flavor of the month. I mean, with foreign help, do you see something like what Ahmed Massoud has built up there in Panjshir is perhaps growing into something more important and becoming a real thorn in the side of the Taliban?
Well, I hear you well, but the situation is completely different to what we have known, for instance, in the early 90s or even in the late Soviet era. You don't have any, on the side of the Western pole, there is for sure no taste for engaging military in Afghanistan anymore. We heard also Russia, Iran, of course. Iran has made a quite strong statement of disapproval of the military attitude of the Taliban in Panjshir, which has come as a sort of surprise, because the dominant discourse was that Tehran was rather in favor or benevolent towards the Taliban in recent weeks, and their wording used in condemnation of what is happening in Panjshir show also that Tehran is not so much aligned on Kabul right now. And the Russian, all the other nations are basically all pledging still for the notion of a so-called inclusive government in Afghanistan, though I think many people are using that word without knowing exactly what it means to be inclusive right now in Afghanistan. I think the main challenge for the Taliban, and that explains also why they are so much delayed in announcing the government, is that they cannot find an internal agreement. Despite all the communication in Panjshir that the victory in Panjshir would be the signal for announcing the government, the disagreement within the Emirates seems to be quite strong right now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you've anticipated my final question to you, which was really to talk about how you rate their first week in power. And yes, they haven't managed to form that inclusive government, whatever an inclusive government made up of Taliban members might look like. But fractures, as you mentioned, do appear to be emerging. Could they become quite fatal fractures as far as the Taliban is concerned?
Well, they may well be. They may well be on the mid and longer term. At the level of discussion within other segments of Afghan political society, what's happening in Panjshir is a sign that it will be very difficult for the Taliban to compromise with more oppositional forces within Afghanistan. So at that level, the inclusive government seems to be rather lure from my point of view. If you look within the Taliban itself, what appears more and more clearly is that you have, at least at the military level, a strong division between those that are controlling the eastern part of the country and those that are controlling the western and southern part of the country. And it's mostly of the people that are around Sirajuddin Haqqani in the east and around the son of Mullah Omar in Kandahar and in Herat. And those that are controlling Kabul right now and that are also fighting in Panjshir seems to disagree with other wings of the Taliban about not only the composition of the government, but what will be the substance itself of the emirate in terms of governance. You have like a split between more hardliner, more radical component of the Taliban movement and people that are more ready to compromise both internally and externally also.